Thanks for joining me today, Greg, in your lovely steakhouse and your beautiful casino. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming to my lovely steakhouse and casino to talk to me, and thank you for caring.
Your latest book, How a Mountain Was Made, you and I have talked about it on the radio.
Right.
And I love it a lot. It's a set of folk tales with lessons for living. And it's kind of fun to read because there are animals in it and there are people in it. And it's sort of indistinguishable who the animals are and who the people, each of them has parts of the personalities of the other. But I was wondering, in terms of those lessons, if there's something that you could find in the book to read to us that could help start off our conversation today.
Well, one of the things I can do is read, the question comes up, are they animals or people? And with us, the ancient stories about the animals and Coyote creating the world, all of that took place at a time when the animals were still people. We have a very different cosmology, if you will, than the Western world, where the Western world has God on top and then man and then woman and so forth. For us, the people are really kind of the lowest. And the animals maintain and contain all the wisdom of the world, and it's our job to kind of be watching them and learning from them about our mistakes and who we are. But anyway, the stories take place, and the animals, much like people, the animals that were people in this time before this one, had a lot of the characteristics of people, and they made the same mistakes that we make. So I think the best thing perhaps I could do is read a short portion of the book, and maybe that'll answer some of the questions that we have. The book is basically there's two people talking, or two crows. They're twin sisters. They're crows or they're people. And one is Answer Woman, and she has all the answers, but she can't answer anything unless somebody asks the question, and Question Woman can't remember anything, so she has to ask. The notion there, Steve, is interdependence. We need one another. So and also I use that as a way to replicate the oral storytelling, which these stories are based on Coast Miwok and Southern Pomo storytelling cycle of creation. So I'll read a small portion, and maybe that'll help answer some of the questions. Anyway, this is between the two stories, and they're talking before they get to another one. But it begins, "The day was beautiful, warm. The twin sisters, Question Woman and Answer Woman, continued sitting atop the fence rail on Gravity Hill. It was spring. Birds sang. Cows in the distance grazed. Sonoma Mountain was awash in spectacular color. I am thinking of so many things after hearing about how Coyote created people," said Question Woman. "And I'm confused. Are you and I people, or are we crows?" "We are all people still," answered Answer Woman. "Some of us took the form of animals, some the form of human beings. But the point is, we are all relatives. We are all related. We have eyes and ears. We all talk. We all have stories. We come from the same village, after all. That is the lesson of this mountain. But people can't hear us. I mean, they hear us, but they don't know what we are saying. That man who just rode by on his bicycle, he might hear us squawk, but he doesn't know what we're saying. Oh, the old people of the village, the human descendants of Coyote, they could understand the animals. They communicated with the animals and plants through songs and dreams, and of course, through stories. You see, in the stories, we are always both humans and animals. That is, we are all people. But the newest people, the people who left this mountain and then came back, many of them are called the forgetters, the humans who forgot the stories of this mountain. What happened? They went away, settled in places all over the world with the stories that they could use for wherever they settled. They could change the stories to suit the places they settled, as long as the stories taught them the same lessons, that we are all one people, animals, plants, and human beings, and that we must always think of and remember one another that way. Oh yes, that makes me think of what you said a while back, before the last story. I asked where the cows and starlings came from, and the wild turkeys. Yes, so it was these forgetter people who brought them. Yes, sister, that is right. Many things happened when the Forgetter people returned here. They brought new animals and plants, yes, but the Forgetters also killed all of the bears and the elk and the pronghorn. They cut down trees. You see, they forgot the stories. They forgot we are all one people, and the animals, indeed the entire mountain, began to suffer. Now we must all try to learn to live together. We must all remember the stories again. But how? Well, we must tell the stories and ask that everyone learn from them. People can always change the stories to suit their needs, as long as the stories teach the same lessons of love and respect for all of life. The stories can change? Of course, I said so already. The stories always change for different times and different places.
I love that. Okay, so the Forgetters. Let's talk about the Forgetters, because in thinking about this, I thought about, and this may be a funny leap, our fires in 2017. And the idea that what we had forgotten was what the Indians here knew, who had lived here for thousands of years, that we needed to make small fires to avoid huge fires. So that's just one kind of a small example, but you're intimating that there are bigger examples, that we've forgotten things even more important than these fires.
Well, yes. I mean, one of the fundamental things to think about, and there's two ways, is that, again, there's been a notion among environmentalists in the past that nature just should be left alone, that we weren't a part of it. We were always coexisting here for thousands upon thousands of years, and who's counting? You know, people always say to me, Steve, oh, did you come down the Bering Straits? And I said, I don't know, but I have my bearings straight. We coexisted, so we pruned the trees. We took eggs from certain nests so that there wouldn't be too many birds. We cut the sedges in the sand so that the sedge roots would grow longer for baskets. We kept the creeks cleared, the water clear. We took care of things. We worked. We coexisted with nature. Our culture had aspects to it, ceremonies that imitated so much ways of working with nature. So we were here, and that's important. But what undergirded this, what predicated this kind of care for the landscape, was the profound belief and understanding that everything, even the tiniest gnat or stone, had potential power. And if you violated that or didn't respect it, it could come back on you and hurt you. So, because again, we're connected and each thing had power in this world. So, for instance, I might be a good person, but I have songs that if you were going to come and steal something from me and hurt me, these songs in my spirit with these songs would come back and hurt you or someone in your family. All the trees and animals had the same thing. So you approached your larger family with that profound respect. The people on the coast, the Kashaya, the southwestern Pomo, their word for white people is miracles, or palacha, or the forgetters, they call them palacha. They call them miracles. And I used to ask the old people, why do you call them miracles? And they said, well, when they came, they were chopping down the trees and killing people and killing animals, damming up the waters. And instead of getting punished, more of them kept coming. And we thought they were miraculous. Nothing was coming back on them. Of course, as you and I know here, sitting on this, I believe the third day of 2020, it's all come back on us. Everything is poisoned. The water, air, our minds, the disconnection, it's all come back. It just took a little longer. But in terms of our thousands of years, 180 years isn't that long.
Let's talk for a minute about racism, and we're having a fellow on our program, John Powell, who is one of the people in the Bay Area who talks most intelligently and bravely about racism. And I love the way he uses language, because he talks about racism as othering. And to me, and this is where you and your expertise come in, There is no group of people in the United States that have been othered as much as the people who were here before the other folks got here, the American Indians. And I wonder if in that othering, there's a sense that we might be able to start to change the story of othering and the American Indians.
Well, I'm familiar with Professor Powell's notion of othering. But let me just jump back a second, if I may.
Please.
I think to kill us, we were othered.
Right.
You had to other us, and that's what you do in war and times of racism and things like that. The other person becomes other and less. So we were othered, but then we were forgotten. So, okay, once we were defeated, we were forgotten. So, as I like to say, I think the American Indian is the prick in the American conscience. America can say slavery was bad, but we got rid of it, of course, never mind the legacy of slavery. And we can say, well, the immigrants, they chose to come here, never mind the circumstances under which they had to come. But how do you deal with mass genocide, where 90 to 95% of the indigenous population was wiped out in a short time and you took the land? You can't really wipe that one away except to forget it, to push it away, push it to the sides. And consequently, there's two stereotypes that remain of the American Indian, the way that we continue to be othered in a small way that we are remembered. One is the old stereotype that we're wagon burners when it comes to a question of power or territory. That's how they othered us. We were wagon burners, terrible people. And the other now, more recent one, is lo, the poor fallen nature god. Oh, it's terrible what's happened, but we love their art and we love them in museums and all of that sort of thing. It's part of history. Never are we complicated individuals who've endured and in many ways shaped American history. But hopefully that will change.
Well, that's what I'm here to ask you. And let me jump back a little bit to your very first set of stories when you burst on the scene in 1994, about 25 years ago, with Grand Avenue. And I wanted you to think about for a minute what has changed in those 25 years. Part of the story of Grand Avenue is, again, not far from where we're sitting, people living in Santa Rosa on the fringes of the city in ways that didn't allow them to live as full lives as they possibly could have. And now it's 25 years later. And tell me what has changed in those 25 years.
Well, Grand Avenue is about the legacy of homelessness, how we've been made strangers in our homeland. And in that way, we sort of join all of Americans, because Americans and everybody else is a stranger in this homeland. So the question has always been, how do we create a home again? How do we create a safe home for everybody? Everybody's here. But to more specifically answer your question, so much has changed. Because at that point, my tribe was not even federally recognized. We were illegally terminated in 1958. At that time, I was still trying to push a bill through Congress to right that wrong. And then a few years, 4 or 5 years later, of course, we were able to get the bill through Congress. President Clinton signed that bill on December 27th, 2000. A little over 19 years ago, and gave us our rights back as a tribe, acknowledging that. And by the way, Steve, we're the last tribe in the United States of America to be restored by an act of Congress to this day, which is pretty historic, I think. So, of course, we got our rights back, and we could apply for, some health grants and education grants and a few other things, but they didn't say they would buy us a new reservation. So, we tried different things.
Wasn't there a small place in Sebastopol where
we originally had 15 acres there, but we lost that. It was illegally terminated in 1958. Okay. So there was one house on there, and a woman from the tribe owned that in private ownership, 1 acre at that time. So it was private ownership, and so but we couldn't go back and claim that. We wouldn't take it from her anyway. We're glad she stayed there as a landmark and held down the land. But so what does this tribe do? What do we do? So I was a professor at UCLA in English, and folks began to discuss the C word, not cancer. Excuse me. And the last thing I wanted to do was
all right, let's make it explicit. Casino?
Casino,
Oh, okay.
yes.
All right.
And I thought that's the last thing. I mean, I have a PhD in modern thought and literature. I'd never been in a casino. I didn't know. I wanted to help my people get their rights back. But as my non-Indian mother said, you owe it to your people to make sure that things go right, that you're not taken advantage of by lawyers and others and investors. So, of course, guilt pushed me through. And I sat down with the tribal council and said I would get involved in this as long as, and I understood that we had a location, right? Everything about a casino, these Indian casinos, is dependent, the success of one is dependent on your location. And I knew we were now the closest federally recognized tribe to the Bay Area. So that would mean we'd probably have access to a large population. But I said, I don't want to get involved unless this casino resort can be something that will benefit Indian and non-Indian alike. We are all here together, and how can we use what resources we have to take care of our own people and to ensure that they become engaged, empowered citizens of the larger community, but at the same time have an influence in the larger community to support social justice and environmental stewardship. It sounded crazy. They agreed. Very few people in Sonoma County agreed.
Right, I was going to say this is wildly controversial.
It was hugely controversial. There were death threats against me, stories told about me and that I wasn't Indian and all these crazy narratives that were flying around. My God, Obama had it easy compared to me with all the stuff that they flew around about him. But in any event, we proceeded, and I kept telling my folks, my tribe, take the high road. No matter what kind of digs, take the high road. And we had our eye on the prize, which was the possibility of being in a position to once again create a home for ourselves and hopefully others, a safe home. So long story short, I went out and borrowed almost $1 billion, built this place, and let's fast forward. We opened, it took a while because we went through all the environmental studies and more that was required to make the locals happy. We moved, spent a lot of money, went to different places. Today, a little over 6 years after being open, we're arguably one of the most successful businesses in Sonoma County, if not the most successful business in terms of revenue.
Well, you won't tell us exactly what the revenue is, though.
I can't tell you,
okay.
But I can tell you that we're doing well.
Okay.
Very well. So to the tune of, as I just showed you on a piece of paper, through the mitigation with the state and with the county and charitable giving, we've given in 6 years close to $120 million here. And that's just the beginning. But we started off on the right track. First, I worked with Governor Brown, to create a compact whereby the bulk of the revenue share that would normally go to the state comes back to the local governments. So that, for instance, they get both Rohnert Park and Sonoma County get large annual revenues from us. But when this debt is paid off, and it's coming up very soon, Sonoma County will get up to $25 million a year for environmental restoration and organic farming.
That 2020, 2021, when are we hoping to see that?
So I would say somewhere in 2021.
Okay.
22. Now, it depends on the revenue, but they will get up to $25 million. Jerry Brown thought that was a win-win, and it was a precedent-setting compact. Furthermore, we have about 2,000 team members here. We wanted dignity in the workplace. That is translated to everybody who works here 20 hours or more a week, which is 99% of the people, get the Kaiser Gold Cadillac plan, and they pay nothing out of their paycheck for full coverage. $10 deductible for aspirin, or as I like to say, brain surgery, which I probably need. And then, of course, they get $2,500 dental a year and an eye check. We feed them breakfast, lunch, and dinner with a huge buffet of choice in our team dining room. And I remember when we opened, I took Governor Brown on a tour around here. And, you know, he can be a bit, doesn't say much sometimes. He's a man of few words often. And I thought, oh my God, here's a guy who I studied with Gregory Bateson and philosophy and all this. And I'm taking him around a casino of all things. And he's not saying much. And I'm pointing out all these good things. And he's still not saying much. So at the end of the tour, we had come out of the team dining room. And I said, well, Governor Brown, what do you think? And he said, well, you haven't shown me where the HR is. Where do I get a job? Okay, that's good. So, but again, so now what that has done, and in the last 8 or 9 years, we have turned around nearly an 80% dropout rate of our students from ninth grade to 100% graduating from high school, and many in college.
And these are members of
our tribe. And our Tribal Aid to Needy Families programs, which are federally funded, we can supplement those revenues with casino revenues. So the our TANF program already didn't just serve people in our tribe, but serves all American Indians in Marin and Sonoma County. We supplement that so that we have programs in the summer where 100 kids are doing word-for-word theater and performing Indian kids on stage, things we've never thought of before. They're reading their work at the Bay Area Book Festival. They're becoming young, empowered citizens. They're going to college. It is remarkable what's happening. We have counseling sessions where we deal with the legacy of colonization and how that has created a kind of continuing repetitive turmoil in a lot of our families so that we can undo those narratives. So that's just remarkable. And then, of course, as many of the Sonoma County folks know, we've supported so many things, environmental issues and social justice issues in Sonoma County. And we're just beginning. We pretty much financed the Measure M measure for the parks. So,
well, let me ask then specifically for 2020.
Okay.
What your main things that you would like to accomplish, what you'll be proudest of when you look back in 2021. What does this coming year look like for you?
Very important. Just as we created a partnership, precedent-setting partnership with Sonoma County with a co-management agreement of Tolay Lake Regional Park, we are now looking to create partnerships with nonprofits, the state parks, and the federal parks to co-manage and support those parks with those respective agencies. I think partnerships are key. And we can create those models. And so I'm really looking forward to that kind of thing, that creating those partnerships. And in fact, I talked to Gavin Newsom about that just before Christmas, and he thinks that's the way to go. Partnerships are what we have to do. The other thing that I'm also really proud of is I'm on the board of the Museum of the American Indian, the Smithsonian board, and they just agreed to allow me, working with them, to create a template for the public schools to recreate the history and culture that will be taught of Indian people in the schools. A template that'll be for 4th grade, 8th grade, and the senior year. And each template will have, depending on the difficulty of the level, will have 3 strands. National Indian history, state Indian history, and local Indian history, preferably written by the local Indians themselves. We will create this digitally. It'll be in the libraries and public schools for all teachers in these classes.
And where's the funding coming from?
The funding, a lot of it's going to come from Graton.
Huh? Okay. the other thing that's happening in 2020 are things that we have no control over. There'll be an election, there'll be an impeachment trial, there will be continuing tensions in the Middle East, there'll be a census. All of these things are happening whether we want them to or not, and they will affect us and our lives. What's your thought about any of that in the coming year?
I'm very worried, obviously, about the world situation and climate disaster. And obviously we have to vote in state and federal elections. We have to voice our opinion. We have to protest and do all the things we've always done and pay attention to the larger currents. But most importantly, all of us have to act locally and do what we can and what's within our power locally to create models, healthy cells, so even if things fall apart, there will be a counter narrative. Let Sonoma County, let Graton Resort and Casino, let the Federated Indians of Graton Rancheria work with others, the parks, the regional parks, the county, the state, and the federal government to create healthy models that are a counter story to one of homelessness, fear, and environmental degradation.
Okay, and then let's go, it's 2020, let's look forward to 2040. You probably won't be the chairman anymore, you'll be 87, so will I. But what do you see in the further future? Because one of the things we're doing is we're looking at 2020, and then our idea was to look at the future with as close as we could to 2020 vision.
Yeah, look back 20 years and what's happened and look forward 20 years. Well, I'm very concerned about the climate models and how fast we are, and that is going to determine everything. And until we come to terms with that, I think if we are around and if civilization isn't, as we know it, isn't greatly compromised, what a world economy hopefully will be based on will be an economy of environmental recovery. Because that is what we're going to have to do. And if there's any business and jobs to do to survive, it's going to have to be in that area and involve many of us. So if we look ahead 20 years and things are happening very fast, and there may be some difficulties, but if we get past war, if we get past famine, if we get past drought, we still have the opportunity to work together using human imagination to once again create a healthy home. And if the economy is based on that, on environmental recovery, I think we can make it. That's going to be the way. But it's going to take that transformation. Let me end with a story that has come to mind. Mabel McKay, the great Pomo basket weaver and medicine woman here, who was such an influence in my life. About 50 years ago, I was driving back from 40 years ago, God, I'm getting old, from Stanford University with her, and she was down there talking to the students, and we were driving, and she was looking at the hills, and she said, everything's going to dry. Everything's going to go dry. It's going to burn. The world's going to heat up. Everything's going to go dry. That's before we had terms like global warming, or at least they weren't in common parlance, but at that point. But she was saying that, and of course I was a youngish man, and I said, "Oh," and she said that was her latest dream of the future. And I said, "Oh, Mabel, what do we do?" "Well, that's horrible. What are we going to do?" And she started laughing. And she said, "That's cute. What are we going to do?" I said, "No, Mabel, I'm serious. Really, what do we do?" And she was silent for a moment, and then she said, as clear as a bell, "You live the best way you know how. What else?" So now, going into the next 20 years, we have to live the best way we know how. We can't be scared. We have to find peace within ourselves, because the whole notion of running and being scared of the future and the past is a history that shaped where we are today. Fearful and running, fearful of the other. But we do have to find ways to live the best way we know how and live it.
All right. Thanks, Greg. I always love talking with you. I appreciate your taking the time.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for caring.